This is the Motivated Business Show, hosted by me, Mark Terrell, the author of Motivated, the Reluctant Leader's Guide to Building a Business that Sets You Free. In my book, I share the 7-step process to get the measure of your business. M.E.A.S.U.R.E is an acronym that stands for Mirror, Evaluate, Action, Systemize, Unify, Review, and Energize. On each episode, I'll be chatting to a business owner about how they stay motivated and how they've got the measure of their business. So without further ado, let's find out who's joining me on this episode. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Motivated Business Show with me, Mark Terrell. And today's guest, well, we've just had a pre-podcast chat, and there's been lots going on in her life, and she's had a big move in her life as well with regards to where she's living. So that's going to be interesting to chat about that and how that went for her, and also about obviously what she does in her work. Before we do that though, just to remind you that during the podcast I always mention the 7-step process, which I wrote about in my book Motivated, and you can get that book either direct from me, from my website, or you can buy it from Amazon in book or Kindle form. If you'd like to keep the podcast on the road, as it were, then any contribution with the Buy Me a Coffee app would be much appreciated. And if you buy me 2 coffees, you can also use this QR code. If you buy me 2 coffees, then I will send you a copy of my book. So hopefully that's an incentive just to give us a little bit of your well-earned cash to keep the podcast going. And obviously, if you've got some value from the podcast, of course. Right, without further ado then, let's bring on today's guest. Welcome, Marilise.
Good morning, Mark. It's really great to be here with you.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. Before we delve into the topics, let's give you the opportunity to introduce yourself properly.
Great, thank you. And hello, everybody. I am very happy to spend this time with you. I'm Marilise de Villiers, and I'm the owner and founder at M.E.A.S.U.R.E Coaching and Consulting, where we specialize in creating cyber risk-aware cultures and also coach executives to lead and develop high-performing teams. So yes, I am very much now in South Africa, as Mark alluded to. We have moved back after 18 years in the UK, where I have spent the last sort of 13, 14 years really specializing in behavioral change, and more specifically in the cybersecurity industry. So that's where I now find myself doing most of my work, and really a lot of need in our space around dealing with stress and burnout, and so recovering as well from burnout, which is also a little bit of my own personal story around sort of the reason why I stepped away from a very successful corporate career, and I put successful really in sort of quotation marks, because I've really since stepping away in 2017 had to redefine success for myself as a business owner, and also, you know, as a mum and a wife, and also someone who've learned to prioritize herself. So yeah, it's been a really incredible journey, and I'm happy to share more later on.
Well, there's lots to dive into there, isn't there? Lots to dive into. And interestingly, one of my guests early on in the this podcast, Mel, she went the opposite direction. So you've said you've gone back to South Africa. She's actually moved from South Africa to the UK. So let's start there, because I think that what is most interesting in respect to, you know, why you made that move, because there's obviously a reason behind it.
Yes, so as I say, 18 years in England. So a 2-year secondment with my audit firm at the time became 3 years, became 4 years. And of course, I always say life happens. And so 18 years later, we found ourselves still in England. The plan was, well, initially the plan was to come back to SA. Then the plan was not to come back to SA. And I think COVID was a big catalyst for us in sort of, again, redefining success, because we really missed our families. That was a big, big, big pull factor for us. For 3 years, we couldn't see family, we couldn't really travel. It sort of just worked out that with the lockdowns, all the respective lockdowns, I think it was a period of almost 3 years, and we just really got to the point where we were really sort of what do we want? And so the question that I really, really encourage my clients also to ask, and I ask myself every day is what do I want? Because it's such a simple question, but I think so few of us actually ever ask ourselves that question. And I think then it sort of evolved, and really leaning into all the reasons that money cannot buy. And I sort of just, that's for me the easiest way to describe why we moved back to South Africa. It's a lifestyle. It's, the sunshine, it's the family, it's just really our roots.
Yeah.
So I sort of say, back to my roaring roots. I, as some of you may have read my book, Roar, How to Tame the Bully Inside and Out. I think very much, the roar theme. I feel so much more kind of home and creative in my space, in my environment now. And I think the environment is so important. So yeah, all in all, it was really, we didn't know this at the time 2 years ago. I would not be able to say, oh, this is going to be how amazing it's all worked out. Didn't feel so at times. But now looking back, I can, hand on heart say it's been the right decision for us.
Brilliant. So that's interesting. A couple of things you said there about success and how we measure success. I think a lot of people they get maybe distracted by the success, what people define, other people define the success, whether it might be monetary or the material things that people aspire to. But ultimately, it's not about those things. It's about what keeps us in a good place. You certainly have got lots of energy. I'm feeling that through the screen. So that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's realizing where you get your energy from, where you operate best, and making decisions with regards to that. So how did you come to make that decision, and how does it sort of link in with the sort of work you do?
Yeah, so I guess the question, my own personal question of what do I want is actually what kind of life would I absolutely love to live? So when I think about my whole life, I think about my life holistically. I think about my health and well-being, love and relationships, my vocation or my profession, and then, of course, time and money freedom. So I sort of think about success that holistically, success and fulfillment. So it's about meaning and purpose, but also really across your health, well-being, your relationships, as well as the freedom that you create in the process, both time and money freedom. So we actually, the very, very first step that we took, and the decision wasn't made instantly. The decision was sort of made over, I'd say, over the course of 2 years, in the sense of we started talking more and more about it. And then in October 2021, we sat the boys down. So we have two teenage sons, 14 and 16 now. So at the time, obviously, they were sort of much, much younger. And we sort of said, if the boys are up for it, for an adventure, then, we would probably consider it. But if they say no, they want to stay in England for the rest of their lives, then, that's conversation closed. And then we will just stay. And they were both so excited about the prospect of living in South Africa. So that really gave Heine and myself a lot of peace of mind, peace of heart, because we knew that the boys were on board. So we didn't just tell them, come on, guys, we're jumping on a plane, we're going back home. And then a series of events. It's like almost like you put the intention out there, and then the universe sort of conspires, make things happen, and things sort of step by step by step fall into place. So it was in February 2022 that we decided, okay, we are going to do this. And that to me was a very much, I woke up one morning and I knew it's happening. And that's kind of how I've been making big decisions in my life. In 2004, when I moved to England from South Africa, I literally woke up one morning and I knew I was doing it. Same way for us coming back way. So there's lots of kind of trust into my intuition, and just that sort of knowing, a heart-based knowing that that was what we had to do, we wanted to do. Yeah, and then the next 18 months was a very, very interesting, as sort of step by step, things sort of fell into place. But, the biggest, I think for me, the biggest, the toughest moment actually was my youngest son, Andreas, decided that he's going to come sooner. So he came to South Africa in August 2022.
Wow.
He didn't want to start like another school year in England. So 3 months school in England. He thought, no, he'd rather come and stay with his grandparents for 3 months and be spoiled, rotten.
Why wouldn't you?
So, so I mean, honestly, that was the toughest moment. Like that day at the airport, at Heathrow Airport, I remember us being sat at Costa Coffee, and me like just crying my eyes out. I was literally like, what was I thinking? How did I think this was a good idea to put my 12-year-old on a plane? Um, Not knowing when I'm going to see him again. So it would be 2.5 months in the end that it took before I saw him again. So that
Yeah.
was everything in comparison. After that didn't feel as hard. It didn't feel as intense. So that was a good,
Yeah.
like, I think, and actually when that happened, I think we knew that there's no turning point now. It's all happening. That was kind of the catalyst that, okay, this is happening.
Well, you say you're not when we're going to see him again. I'm assuming using the technologies that are available to us, you probably saw him the next day or the day after that. With regards to,
Yeah, but
I know
it's
it's
different
different when
when
it's
he's
on the
not
screen then. Yeah.
physically with you in the house, because he's never been away from me for longer than
Yeah.
probably
No,
weeks.
no,
So
I get it. I get it. I get it. So I've written down a few things there. Firstly, the importance of having a vision. So we talk about this. I'm sure I definitely talk about this a lot in my program, and I'm sure it's a big part of yours. And you've got to have a vision before anything starts. You've got to know what the actual outcome is you're trying to work towards, and that's at the essence of leadership. You've got to have a vision that you can then, like you told your well not told you introduced that concept to your family, and then they embraced it, and then they found a way. And actually there's a great example there of your son saying, well, actually I'm actually taking responsibility and I don't want to wait till then because I know that's not going to work for me, so they make their own decisions. So that's another great principle with what we teach, and I know we use similar models, and also the importance there of creating our own environment, isn't it? And we have
yeah.
the ability to create some of our own environment, not everything, but when we sit down, there are certain things that we have control over, and it's identifying what they are and then taking responsibility for them, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think what's really been such a mind-blowing, heart-blowing experience for me is that um, the moment we made the decision to come back, a week later, we found this piece of land which we ended up buying and built sort of the dream home. So the vision was also to build our dream home. Well, initially we thought, okay, we'll just come back for 2 years, we'll check it out, we'll see if we like it, and then we'll sell our place in England, and we'll sort of like the whole do the sensible thing. But we literally went warts and all. We literally within a week found this piece of land and fell in love with it. We literally just saw it on a picture. We didn't even know in real life. I mean, I had a good idea because I grew up in this area, but yeah, I mean, I only saw it in real life for the first time 6 months after we bought it. So
Oh wow! Oh, okay.
yeah, so
Right.
and money even later. So it was a real like a wow moment, and it was a similar wow moment when we actually moved into the house in December last year, when it was actually finished. And I mean, it's not finished, like building a house is another story for another day.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really been that vision, and as I say, the vision evolves as you go along, and it's also about having that ability to distinguish between what you can control and really surrendering a little bit to kind of the things that are without your control, and just being a lot more adaptive and agile to invite changes in direction. But you've got to be like really like, this is what I said to you earlier when we had the pre-conversation about all you need to know is kind of the next best step
Yeah.
with what you have right here, right now. So that's very much, I had to learn that lesson, over the last year and a bit,
Yeah,
2 years.
brilliant. Right, it's really interesting, but we need to move on to what you actually do for a living. I think that's you've alluded to the fact that you've written a book, and also you've mentioned the word "raw" a couple of times. So, tell us a bit more about the book and why the raw is so important to you.
Yeah, so for me, what my passion really is to really help people. Um, it's about alleviating suffering and helping people to recover from abuse, and it's kind of all forms of abuse. So in my own personal story, I've experienced various different forms of abuse, and probably the most prominent one has been the self abuse, that inner bully, that toxic inner conversation, which led to an addiction, so time in rehab. And so I've been struggling quite a bit in the past with a very, very intense voice in my head just telling me that I'm not good enough and I will never be good enough, so it's that sort of whole limiting conversation piece. So yeah, and I think also the reason why eventually I had to step away, because I was in a toxic work situation, so I stepped away from that. um, I wish I could tell you I had the perfect plan for my life back in 2017, but no, I was literally on my knees and, feeling empty and without purpose. And so that's why I'm so passionate now to help people find their roar. And it's all about, making your whole life work. So to our conversation earlier about success, it's about holistically, and how do you make that whole life work? How do you become your whole self? So a real big part of the curriculum that I teach, and a part of my message is about, you have to live life from the inside out. And that's also why the book's title is How to Tame the Bully Inside and Out, because I knew that for things to change, I had to change first. Um, and of course, the whole raw element, external raw element, is the standing up and speaking up, and that's all about empowering people to have a voice, empowering people to share their story, because everybody has a unique story, and everyone's story matters, and it's important that we share our stories with the world.
Yeah. Do you want to step us through what it's an acronym, isn't it? ROAR. Tell us what those four steps are.
So it's recognize, observe, assert, and redirect. So it's very much positioned for a difficult conversation. So I've reframed difficult conversation into courageous conversation, because and this is actually something, we have a mentor, Ali Stewart, who is the founder of Liberating Leadership, and Mark and I met through Liberating Leadership. And Ali was the person that I first heard this say this, when she said, "Oh, when you think about something as difficult, you're going to go into that conversation with, oh, this is difficult, so it's going to be difficult because that's what you're expecting." Whereas if you go in with, this is a courageous conversation, I think it's a very different energy. You can actually feel in your body the different energy when I say courageous versus difficult.
Yeah.
So it's a much higher vibrational energy. So I talk about having the courageous conversation. So recognize and observe is what happens with your inner game, is with your thoughts and your feelings. So that's recognizing and observing what you're saying to yourself, or what the other person is saying to you, and how it makes you feel. So really being aware, that self-awareness piece of how are you interpreting and recognizing what the other person is saying, or what you are saying to yourself, and how is it making you feel. I think the feeling aspect of it for me has been a bit of a journey, because over the course of 20 years in a corporate career, I became so numb to my feelings. um, and and so the recognize and observe is all part of the inner game. So it's winning your inner game, your thoughts and your feelings. And then the assert and the redirect is what you then say and what you do. So that's very much about how you respond. And so the responding element of the conversation, of the acronym, is very much, we want you to be assertive. We want you to say how you feel. We want you to be confident to actually clarify if the person has said something that you need a better understanding of. It's about a learning conversation, so it's about also being on the other person's agenda, and asking questions. It's like I always say, we move away from a battle of messages to a learning conversation. And then obviously the redirect is it's redirecting the conversation to achieve a win-win outcome. So it's really about making sure all the parties leave that conversation feeling good about themselves, feeling good about the other parties, even or especially when it's a negotiation type scenario, and when you've got to sort of stop it and you walk away from it, but knowing when to do that, I think is absolutely vital.
Yeah, and there's so many different negotiating styles, and ultimately there's ones that are helpful and get good outcomes for both parties, but there is others that only get good outcomes from one party. So what we want to be making sure is the win-win, compromising and cooperating are the elements that we need. And if you are, giving in all the time and not getting what you need, because I think that's what a lot of people do, is they just give up everything they want to keep the other
Yeah.
party happy, and then they think that they've actually solved the problem, but actually they've not, because they've made it even more a problem to themselves because they haven't got anything that they wanted. So it's really important to make sure that you're assertive enough to get to that point where you can compromise and cooperate with the other party. Yeah, really interesting. So communication is so important, isn't it?
Yeah. And and also for me, I'm encouraging the leaders that I work with, to be a lot more vulnerable, and I think this is where I draw a lot of inspiration from Brené Brown's work, where she talks about courage. Courage does not exist without vulnerability, so they're kind of two sides of the same coin. And so really, how we learn, what we remember is through storytelling. If you think about the hero's journey, if you think about every movie you've ever watched, every book you've ever read, it's all about the story of the hero's journey, and it's the story of each in our lives. So I do think that we, as a society, have an opportunity really to empower people to share their stories more. I always say, if it helps one person, it's worth sharing. And the personal growth in the process. So I remember preparing for my TEDx talk. So I did a TEDx, "Have you found your roar?" And that was such a journey for me, because your message is always for you first, before you share it with everybody else. And it's often your mess that becomes your message. So it's a really valuable process to put yourself through, from a personal development, from a personal growth perspective. And I think that's the gift my book gave me, was that year-long process of writing the book was also a bit of a healing journey for me, in terms of working through and navigating through the stuff and the reasons why things happen, and how you move forwards from that.
I love that with your mess becomes your message. I've never heard that before. I
Oh
might mention
yes.
that again at some point, because once when you hear something like that, you think actually that really does sort of hit the
I
spot,
mean,
doesn't it?
that's obviously, I'm
Yeah.
quoting someone. I've heard so many people. I've heard
Somebody
a lot
said
of
it.
people
Yeah,
say that. So I
yeah.
don't know who first said it. I would lie if I say, oh,
So yeah, if anybody knows who originally said that, then yeah, put it in the comments because we'll all be interested. So let's move on to. So you talked about the cyber industry and cyber leadership, and I know that you told me before we went live that you have a new course that you're launching with the Cyber Leadership Institute. So do you want to tell us a bit about that, and also why you're involved in the cyber industry in particular?
yeah. I mean, the cybersecurity industry is an absolutely fascinating place to be, and it's also very fast paced. I often compare it to first responders, having to go out to save lives. The difference is we save lives online in the sense of we're protecting our organizations and our people from cybercrime, cyber criminals. It's very pervasive, and I think that's what makes it so hard for people to sort of get their heads around, because it's like you can't feel and touch and see it, you know. So it's but yeah, I literally got an opportunity to work with the cybersecurity team at PwC at the time. So this was a good 14 years ago now, where because cybersecurity was kind of becoming such a big thing, we had a new division in the organization, and one of the CISOs, William Beer, CISO is a Chief Information Security Officer. William Beer approached me and he said, Marilise, ultimately this is actually a people problem we're trying to solve, not just a technology problem. It's actually very much a people problem. I mean, the far majority, over 95% of incidents. So when companies sort of leak information, or employees click on dodgy links and pass information on, happens through human interaction. So the human aspect of cybersecurity is incredibly important. So I sort of went on an adventure. I was really curious. It took me a long time to get my head around all the jargon. It's like a new language that you've got to learn. But now I find myself really passionately working with cybersecurity teams and leaders. The coaching and the consulting elements are merging beautifully, because it's really what I do in my consulting business with creating the cyber risk-aware cultures, and specifically behavioral change really works so well with the actual principles we teach, the sort of high performance habits that we teach as part of the coaching that I do as well. And the course, the Resilient Cyber Leader, is very much to help cyber leaders, become their resilient self and to commit to a life of resilience. And as it happens, I developed this course as I was moving back to South Africa. And again, your mess becomes your message, because I've literally had some days where I'm literally on my knees creating materials on purpose and creating materials on, creating energy for life, whilst I was literally so tired, I just want to sleep all day, So it's amazing when you actually teach things, how you also confront it at a whole new level about the concepts and about actually living and breathing those concepts, because I very passionately live and breathe what I teach. I know you as well, Mark. So it's very I'm very proud of this course, and it's literally starts out really helping people understand what burnout is, and identifying the signs, and then to really do that gap analysis of where they are today, where they want to go, and then the steps they have to take to move towards their best life. And I know your 7 steps also have that in very, very early on. And I think in the second step, it's about current state assessment. So once you've done the vision, you've got to do a current state assessment. So I do exactly the same activity with my students, and then at least then they have a plan to work towards. The most important question we ask to come back to is, what do you want? It's frightening how many people, when they start working with me, do not have a clue. They know what they don't want, which is then where we start, right? But it's really hard. It's really simple, but it's not an easy question to answer.
Brilliant. Well, so you've mentioned it, so it seems like the ideal opportunity to introduce the 7-step model. So I'm going to give you a chance to sit back just for a couple of minutes, Marilise. You shared so much there. So let's just connect what we've been talking about with the 7 steps, and you've already done part of my work for me, I should say. So understanding ourselves is really important. That's when we put up the mirror and understand our behavioural styles and our character strengths, and also our motivations. Be clear about those. And then we can move on to this stage where we evaluate where are we and where do we want to be in the future. And that could be quite difficult. But once you have a better understanding of yourself, actually that really does help you with regards to what's important to you. And I spend a lot of time now thinking about character strengths and how those character strengths, those natural character strengths, are being used in the day to day. And so that's where they sort of what we've mainly been talking about with regards to your journey and all the things that you've talked about fit into the 7 steps. But what I want to just talk about a little bit about what I shared in the book, and this is one of the models which I found in the decision book. Great book to help you with all sorts of things with regards to decision making, and this is what they call the rubber band model. And you can see there that when we're making a decision, there's always things that are holding us back, but there's also things that are pulling us forward. So that's where the rubber band is, that as we move towards one, then the other thing is pulling us back. And so that it's being aware of that, and it's something that I speak to my clients about, particularly with regards to motivations. So with motivations, the 9 motivations for work, which I mentioned pretty much all on my podcast because it's so important to my work, is realizing what we actually go to work for, understanding what drives us, what gets us out of bed in the morning. And if we understand that, then we can then understand the things that we really want, and that sort of opens up that conversation, because it's quite difficult to understand what we really want until we actually get something that sort of helps us along the way. So one of the things that I use is a motivational map, and a motivational map puts the 9 motivations in order, the ones that are most important down to the ones that are least important. And so where this fits in with regards to what's holding us and what's pulling us is that when we have motivations that are keeping us stuck, and those tend to be ones like the defender. The defender is about the need for security and predictability and stability. So if that's strong, then the likelihood that you're going to make a big step like you've just described, Marilise, is unlikely, because if that's important to you, then you're going to stay in that place. But if you want something actually that's more important than that, so if you want to be a spirit, or you want to be a creator, they involve lots of change and bringing in new ideas and innovations and having freedom to make those choices. So to do that, you've got to give up something else. And so that's the sort of journey we have to go on, because it's very difficult to fulfill all our motivators all the time. So we've just got to decide which is most important and make decisions based on those things that are most important to us. So just a little bit of a connection with regards to the 7 steps and what you talked about, Marilise. So any comments on what I shared there?
And I absolutely love the growth motivators, and I love the spirit and the creator, because I think I can definitely relate with that in terms of the change that we've been navigating. I mean, moving countries, I think, is one of the biggest life changes.
Yeah.
And, it was very intense. I mean, 2023 was an absolute blur. And there are so many things that, I had to sort of let go of. And it's things that you don't necessarily think about when you make decisions, like, having to close my UK bank account because you no longer have an address in the UK, so you don't
Right.
qualify for a bank account anymore. And then all the drama that goes with that, obviously
Gosh,
putting
yeah.
the boy putting the boys into new schools, so shifting them from the British curriculum over to the South African curriculum. So Andreas, our youngest son, shifted to the South African curriculum, and he's now starting a whole kind of like, high school or secondary school curriculum here in South Africa. The other son, Heinrich, is already finished with GCSE, so he had to stay in the Cambridge curriculum. So he's doing A-levels, at a private school here, and so they're different schools. And everything we did was kind of around, so obviously the boys and schools. And Heine and I stayed apart for 6 months last year, so he was still in England with Heinrich first half of last year, and I was in South Africa with Andreas because of the school situation.
Yeah, yeah.
What really resonated with me, which you said, was that you've got to really be prepared to walk away from so much of your prior identity and
Yeah.
the things that you sort of took a lot of security from, and it's really about this kind of like completely embracing the new, and having that ability to trust that it will work out, and having faith and trusting your ability to figure it out along
Yeah.
the way.
And it's really
I
just
think
having a plan A and really sticking to plan A unless plan A becomes absolutely impossible, isn't it? Because if you put too many other options in place, then you start to make, not really focused decisions. And it's interesting what you talked about with regards to the element with your kids and schooling, because I had that when my parents bought the retail business that I ultimately ran for 30 years. I was still at school, and I had to make the decision with regards to my schooling because I was halfway through my GCSE, or at the time my O levels at the time, and
yes,
so I ended up staying with a friend and living with him and his parents to finish off my schooling, because the alternative was to start 2 courses from start and catch up 9 months worth of work, which at that age you're never going to do it, are you? It's not realistic. So luckily I had that option. So you just have to, the lesson here is you just got to make it work and find a way, isn't it?
yes, and so we learned a lot from Andreas, and how easy it was for him to make the decision, to leave England and come here, and taking it so in his stride. So I think there's also a benefit of being young and being so adaptable,
Yeah.
and so I'm taking lots of life lessons from my kids at the moment.
Wow, that's right, exactly. Yeah, why shouldn't be? Sadly, Marilise, our time has run out. We've gone over time already, but there's so many things we could talk about. But it's been really great to catch up, firstly, and to learn about what you've been up to and all the things that you've got planned. And it sounds obviously very exciting for the future. So thank you for sharing all that with us. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it too, and I love your 7 steps. And yeah, I mean, I've been a fan. So people get the book.
Thank you. Bless you, bless you. So I'll let you go now, Marilise. Have a great day, and we'll catch up very soon.
And
Thank you to Marilise there. You can see that she's very passionate about what she does, and it doesn't matter these days where you are in the world. You can help all sorts of people from any location. And if you really want something to happen, then you'll find a way. So just before we go, then just to remind you, my book, the 7 Steps model, is included in there, and also there's 2 other steps in there. I talk about the importance of enjoying the journey, which is sort of connects to what we've been talking about today, and also looking after yourself. So nine chapters in there, and I share a lot of my journey in there too. Mind you, buy me a coffee. You can buy me a coffee, which just keeps the wheels in motion with regards to the podcast. And if you buy me 2, scan the barcode and buy me 2 coffees, then I will be more than happy to put a copy of the book in the post for you. So that's it. That's today's episode. Really enjoyed today's conversation, and hopefully you did too. If there's anything that we talked about that particularly resonated, we'd love you to comment. Either myself or Marilise will return or answer your question, and please do that if you're catching this on replay. But so for now though, have a great day, and I will see you very soon on the next episode of the Motivated Business Show.